Now we're analyzing the Steelers, top to bottom, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, defense. Another team in the AFC North that scraped their way into the playoffs, fell 31-17 to the Bills. The Steelers, in my opinion, Dylan, are the AFC North in a nutshell. It's a team that's going to find a way to win, went 10-7 this year, but they're not going to do it in a very exciting fashion. They're not going to jump off the page. That's kind of reflected in fantasy. Let's jump into their position grades, and let's start with the glory, the center of it all, the quarterback position. We are not big fans of what they have going on in Pittsburgh right now, and I don't think many would be. My notes for this: instability at the position. I would expect this team to draft somebody else going forward. Would kind of hope they do. They are at ground zero. There was an inkling of hope towards the end, and I'll let you touch on that. There's a reason these guys are not an F.
Yeah, and that's, like you mentioned, the quarterback just rough, and it has been for the last couple of seasons.
Yeah.
However, that glimmer of hope that we both saw was Mason Rudolph, but is he a starter? And if Steelers don't draft a quarterback in the first round, I see Rudolph starting next year unless they want to go out and get this other quarterback who I think they very well could, Kirk Cousins, because I think Kirk Cousins on that Steelers team would enhance the receiving core, and I think they'd be contenders to win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins.
I was not expecting you to bring that up. That's good to know, because obviously he can be free beyond this year, and if the Steelers are going to go after him, they do have the freedom to do so. I would argue, on paper, yes, you have the best receiver in the game in Justin Jefferson when healthy on the Vikings, but if you look at these two teams on paper and take Kirk off of them, which essentially Kirk was off of both of them the last few weeks after the injury, way better supporting cast in Pittsburgh. Don't know what's going to happen with Mike Tomlin. Someone brought up his contract and that he has 1 year left, and he quite literally booked it out of the press conference. So I'm not sure if Mike Tomlin's going to be there, but we can hang our hats on the rest of this team, and I'm not going to spoil too much, but I can promise you folks this: beyond the quarterback, it gets a lot better. The running game is one of those main elements. I've got A- still, and you've got B+. I would argue top 3 1-2 punch out of the backfield in Najee Harris, the bruiser, and Jaylen Warren. We'll call him the finesse back, the pass catcher, the receiver, if you will. Out of the two, Warren 5.3 yards per carry, much more usage in his sophomore year compared to his freshman year. A lot to like there. Najee Harris, I ripped on him a lot at first, and then I realized what they were doing. Again, they're going to use him in those short yardage situations. In the cold weather, that's when you're going to use somebody like that, where he's heavier and it hurts a heck of a lot more to take contact from Harris than it does Warren. Both hard runners. This is a lethal combo, so I've got A-. What do you have for them?
Yeah, I'm at a B+, and the only reason I'm a tick down is just because the start of the season, Najee was utilized the wrong way, and he was used as that every down back for the most part, which it wasn't the right role for him. I think as the season matured, I believe he stepped into a better role. I think that offense and Mike Tomlin seeing that every down back was not viable, and they switched it up, which really boosted this grade up for me. And then the utilization from both backs at the end of the year was just fantastic.
Yep.
Great work of complementary running back usage right there.
And it's interesting you bring up the beginning of the season, because if we're doing a summary of 2023, I will agree. Abysmal at the beginning, and there were people like me going, why is Jaylen Warren not your starter? And then you start to realize, especially after the firing of Matt Canada, where they looked a lot better on offense down the stretch, yeah, these are two different types of backs, and they need to be treated like so. I don't want to see Jaylen Warren in a dog pile on 4th and inches with the game on the line. But I also don't want to see Najee Harris with a spread out attack on 1st and 10 getting me 2 yards because he doesn't have the breakaway speed. So I like it a lot, actually. You taking the angle that the play calling, a little suspicious at the beginning, a little suspect, but in general, they kind of got through it. The talent definitely there. I think that grade goes up as long as they are used properly in 2024. Both of these guys hovered within the top 20 in standard PPR throughout the year, and there are not many backfields you can make that claim for. A lot to be excited about in the backfield of Pittsburgh. Wide receiver feels like the fountain of untapped potential. You have, in my opinion, so much talent here, and you and I are kind of sitting in the same spot here, both at C+, down the middle. not long ago where Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, before he didn't play a whole lot of football and did a whole lot of talking, and George Pickens shared this core. I think this is like B+, A- potential if these guys stay healthy, and if, as we revert to categories before, the quarterback play is optimal. There's a lot holding this back. Johnson had seen very high target numbers in the 140s, so averaging, even before we converted to a 17-game season, about 9 targets a game, which is insane. 1,000-yard receiver potential easily. But the issue, catch percentage. What is that metric from? Poor quarterback play. You don't realize how great and manageable Big Ben was until he leaves and you got to scramble, right? And you realize Kenny Pickett wasn't the answer. I'll end with this. The issue, the focus of this offense, because it's where they're strongest, the run. They have been sticking with Najee and Jaylen Warren, and once they realize that they don't have a conclusive answer at quarterback, they stuck to the run, and as a result, you're not going to see George Pickens or Deontay Johnson get too involved. What do you have for this category?
Yeah, I would say that the C+ is looking on the future more than what they did this year, because the future of this receiving core is super interesting, because I thought Pickens played well enough to be a late round pick. And I also thought Johnson kept his role just being very right down the middle. You know what you're going to get out of him. But the thing right now is I think George Pickens would be an amazing fantasy option if the right quarterback is present. Like I alluded to earlier, if a Kirk Cousins would come to this team. And same thing, like Johnson, just a very average season from him. There's no real standouts in the receiving core, which kind of devalues that. But that also brings that value up, because if you take Pickens and Johnson, they're pretty much identical.
Right. You got the speedier option in Johnson, and right. Pickens is more of like your 50-50 guy. Go up and get it. So, numbers-wise, pretty dang similar in a healthy slate and a vacuum where they both play the full season. I like that a lot. I agree you bring maybe Kirkyo in there, somebody else who's got more upside and is more established, and maybe the wide receiver play goes up. Because, I mean, yeah, you look at the depth. I would take George Pickens or Deontay Johnson in a vacuum as my wide receiver 2 any day of the week. We haven't seen either of them really elevate to that strong, consistent. Pickens had that breakout game, but consistent wide receiver 1 yet, and that's largely due to quarterback play. This is kind of a disappointing one. I thought that I'd be rating tight end a lot higher after this season. I was a big Pat Freiermuth buyer. Just wasn't healthy. Not a whole lot of depth behind him at all, really. I believe Connor Hayward was supposed to be up next. 23 receptions for 167 yards. We saw what happened with the Ravens. One guy goes down, the other one utilized heavily. 5 touchdowns in 5 games. We did not get that result with the Steelers. Can we blame it on quarterback play? Maybe. Lack of involvement, lack of scoring in general. And Pat was hurt, so you've got C- here.
Yeah, Freiermuth was out for over half the season. He adds nice production. And the drop-off, Washington was very mediocre, didn't shine when needed to. I thought he was the second tight end, Washington, but I guess you have Hayward, so it just shows that you really have no idea who is that true number 2 tight end. I don't really trust the pass catchers in this run-heavy offense, and that's said for both tight end and receiver.
And that's just it, right? We don't even know who the true... In the depth chart, I believe, Washington is the second guy, but he wasn't utilized like it, right? Next man up on paper, per public record, should have been Washington, but instead it went to Connor Hayward, so... Yeah, we got an interesting situation going on there. If Freiermuth was healthy, I still don't know how well it would have been. I think that team, the tight end situation, considering the lack of depth and the lack of quarterback play, broken record here, could top out at B+, but we didn't see that, all thanks due to injury. We go to the defense. Not what we're used to seeing from Pittsburgh, but still a gritty team. TJ Watt being out down the stretch hurt the chances against the Bills. Hopefully no long-term issues there. I'm going to kind of let the postseason just bring it down half a tick, so otherwise I would have been at B+. Not forcing any turnovers out of Josh Allen is not something many could say they had on their plate. Usually teams were able to make him turn the ball over. Yes, they ran the ball a lot. They finished the season giving up 27 points per contest in their last 3 games. Minkah Fitzpatrick, proven vet back there. They've got Porter as well. But that team had a lot more holes in it than I'm used to. And looking forward, Minkah's only going to get older. I know he's not like crazy old, but we're going to need some more answers specifically on that back end. So I've got B, you've got B+.
Yeah, I guess it's just to the fact that Watt and Fitzpatrick are proven guys on the defense. They're going to get you production on that defensive end. Plus, knowing the history of the Steelers and how they draft, they love drafting defense first round. So they're probably going to go out and get another defensive guy. Is that the right move? Depends if they get a quarterback in free agency. But knowing that draft history of going defense first, and Mike Tomlin is a defensive coach, it kind of just adds value on that defense for me.
Yeah, and I guess that's just the whole question, right? Does Tomlin stay there? That really determines the future. I like your argument in that the main sources of scoring in fantasy football are your sacks and your interceptions. And you've got 2 ball hawks, one who can bring a quarterback down at a very high rate and has a great pass rush percentage, and one guy who's got a nose for the football through the air in Minkah to kind of put a lid on that defense. So I like that a lot. We look at the Steelers, just like most AFC North teams, strong defense, strong running game, lots of questions at the quarterback situation. And I would even go on the opposite end and say there's not much of a question at all that they need to find somebody else there. Maybe it's you go and get Kirk Cousins like Dylan alluded to. Maybe you go draft. That would really lift the potential of the 3rd and 4th categories, wide receiver and tight end. Lots of potential here. This team scraped into the playoffs. Imagine what they had, or what they would have had for results if they had a good signal caller.